Okay, got a Nissan, what is this, CPJ? Doesn't matter. It has an H20 engine. Complaint from the customer is that no crank, no start. Okay. Outside service indicated that they did a voltage drop test on the battery while cranking. This is a new battery that service tech installed outside. Okay, crank it. Okay, 6 volts it dropped down to. Tech came in first. As per the report, same thing was happening. 4 volts voltage drop on the battery, right? Installed a new battery, drop down the same, 8 volts. Suspected bad new battery, had the new battery tested fine, put it back in, same problem. What did they do afterwards? That they check it's not the battery, is replace the starter because they suspected a bad starter. Replaced with a new starter, still the same problem. That test that they did the first time that the tech went in to diagnose this problem was incomplete because he only did a voltage drop test. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that the battery that was in the truck originally was not bad. Okay? But doing a voltage drop test does not mean necessarily that the battery is the culprit. Okay? When I said that there is something missing from this, is that you should have an M-clamp attached to that battery cable. Right? Now, even though, let's say, he put in a new battery and it dropped the same, right? Why would he suspect that the battery was bad? Because just solely on the drop that it did. The voltage from a fully charged battery, 12.6, it dropped down to 8 volts. That's what he said. True?
Yeah.
The story is incomplete because if the starter cannot spin, is it gonna try to eat more current or reduce the current? It's gonna jump up, right? Because at the end of the day, that starter is a motor. If the motor cannot spin, the starter motor cannot spin, it cannot induce counter electromotive voltage, right? EMF. So, at the end of the day, when the starter is not able to spin, it's a shorted wire from a positive to a negative. True? And what would that do? It is going to try to eat as much current as it can from the battery. And what is the battery going to do? Try to supply that current, but the voltage is going to drop. Does that make sense? So that was the first mistake.
It's either that or something is wrong and it can't turn over.
And that's fine. So my problem with that diagnostic procedure is not the point that it may be a seized engine. This might as well be a seized engine. The problem with that is replacing the battery and replacing the starter before considering a seized engine. Okay? I get the battery. That's fine because the operator might have been cranking it, trying and trying. And if it was a used battery was in it already, which is more likely, it might have toasted the battery already. And that's fine. That's okay, right? But when you were expecting a starter, which, again, if the starter is seized up, same. You see high current, starter doesn't turn. Let's say the bearing was already seized up inside the starter. Same problem, right? But at that point, you take out the starter and try to rotate the engine manually.
Is there a peaker in here?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a peaker or something?
Yeah, you either rotate it from here or you rotate it from the front of the engine by getting to the crank. If you are not able to spin this engine manually, there's no point putting in a new starter. Does that make sense? If the engine is able to spin, or you're able to move the engine manually, then it makes sense that it may be a starter. Does that make sense? So that is the problem that I see on the report. This may very well be a seized engine, but it's the process of doing the diagnostics to arrive at a seized engine.
So from the battery, it should have been not necessarily a starter, but manually.
From the battery, that's fine. You crank it. You see the voltage drop down to 4 volts. Okay, that's fine. It could be a battery, but that's why I always carry an amp clamp.
Or if you measure the voltage at the starter, not cranking, just when it's key on.
Same thing, right?
What's the
So here's the thing. Battery voltage at the battery drops down to 4 volts, right? Does it matter to measure the battery or the battery voltage at the starter terminal? It does not anymore.
Well,
Because even at the battery, it was already at 4 volts.
oh, okay, so that's battery.
Right? Now, if I see 12 volts and it did not change on the battery end, and I just hear a click, right? Then it's worthwhile to check what battery voltage is reaching the starter terminal. Because I might have a voltage drop with high resistance. But the amp clamp would still tell you that. Why? Because if I have a high electrical resistance, would it have a high current or a low current reading on the amp clamp?
High resistance,
Yeah,
high current.
low current,
Oh,
electrical resistance.
Oh.
That's why I said electrical resistance, not mechanical resistance.
Mm.
Electrical resistance in the cable would produce a low current reading,
Mhm.
right? So the current that is needed by that starter to spin, right, to start spinning, would at least be 600 amps to start, and then would drop down to like 200, 150, depending, right? But if I see less than that, then I have a problem with high resistance electrical wise.
yes. I know what's about.
But if I see a high current and the voltage drops, then I'm looking at mechanical resistance. Right? Mechanical resistance now, because the higher current would tell me that, okay, the battery is trying to supply the current. I have no high electrical resistance because the current was able to pass through. Right? So it might be a mechanical resistance now in the starter or in the engine itself. Right? And that's where you make the determination now to say, okay, am I looking at electrical resistance or mechanical resistance?
No.
Okay, 12.28, not the best, right? Because they were cranking it over for a long time. Now you have an amp clamp connected, maximum 400. Okay, crank it. Oh well. Okay, so there is, by doing this test, you know there is a high mechanical resistance on this engine. Now we're not going to doubt the starter anymore because the starter was already replaced. Right? We're not going to doubt the battery anymore. Right? By doing this test, I mean, you have a high current going through that. And that's why the battery voltage is dropping, because the current is so big. Right? The battery was good. Remember, the report said that it was already replaced with a brand new battery. They even doubted the brand new battery and had to test it again.
Is that a new starter?
That's a new starter.
See, that's good.
Oh, that's good. It's a brand new starter that's in this truck. A new battery, a new starter. So we are now really looking at a big mechanical resistance preventing the starter from turning, right? Which is what the report is saying. I don't have a problem with that. The problem I have is the diagnostic process that was done to arrive at a seized engine, or possibly a seized engine. Right? So what we're going to try to do with this one is we're going to take out the starter, right? And then we're going to try to move this engine or spin this engine manually. Okay? Start engine, we're taking out the starter, all the external loads just to make sure, right? And we didn't really have to go this far. We could have just easily take out the starter, take out the pump, right, the belt, whatever. But just to eliminate every single possibility there is. But still right now, that shit wouldn't budge. So even if we try to crank it from the bottom, yep, yeah, that engine doesn't budge, man. So no movement on this end. There's only the bolt that's moving. So yep, this is really a seized engine.